All right, a pleasant good afternoon to each and every one of you out there. And as promised, first of all, what I'm going to do is wish all of you, again, a pleasant good afternoon, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, Water Island. And as advertised, well, let's put it this way. The governor has a good way of getting everything on the internet. I mean, he really has technically got this to the point where us old-timers are marveling at this. In any event, I've got the governor of the United States Virgin Islands here, Kenneth E. Mapp, and of course I've got the mayor who is also here, and he is getting ready to do his thing. First of all, a pleasant good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Holland. How are you? And how are you doing, Mr. White?
A pleasure to see you.
Good pleasure to see everyone, and I'm happy to be here post State of the Territory and the first few weeks of the second year.
Listen, I saw your interview. We usually don't advertise other people, but the consortium interview is an excellent interview. It really was a great interview. You know.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure exactly what pieces you found thrilling, but I'm not going to ask you to do that because there was one point there. I'm not going to get into the specifics where he asked me a question, and my brain only kept sending one word to my tongue. But I did enjoy doing that.
It was like, I don't know whether you followed this when I was at the Northeast meeting. I guess I
did see some articles,
yes. I told some secrets out of school. In any event, Politico picked it up, and obviously it went viral because I was very critical, particularly being elected in a community, a minority community, and needless to say, I'm not very happy with Mr. Trump. But when you take a look at these things, and I am talking about sometimes well, let's put it this way, before the mouth moves, sometimes we don't engage our brain. And I'm not saying you do this, but I also did a follow-up where I had suggested to him he should get some duct tape. Very effective. But in any event, are you watching it nationally?
Some of it. I don't get much television in, and unfortunately, in the day I don't get much radio in, and I do listen. I believe when I was getting ready this morning, he did not do as well as he had predicted in Iowa, and the Democrats literally at what we like to say on a 30 basis point or just 0.3 of a point. Separation is really a clear split right down the middle, and given where Senator Sanders began from the issues of name recognition and all those issues, that's a tremendous feat. But the nation is very diverse, and being an independent, I get to watch both sides and learn and marvel, and having had been a Republican,
right.
This is not a knock against the party, but there are very few things in my life I've done extremely time on point, and it's clear my exit from the Republican Party was clearly a time on point.
Well, I think probably you and Edgar Ross,
Yes.
Edgar was a Republican, and just the issues that I brought up nationally, that stuff that we talk in-house about our family, reaching out to minorities, and of course, it isn't the way it's not the way what we're talking about, it's the way we say it. I mean, Martin Luther King was a Republican.
Well,
I mean, come on.
Well,
you can't displace minorities.
And you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Republican is right, Democrats left. That's the way that this terminology goes. And but when I was at the Kennedy School in '99, there was clearly a marked shift in where the Republican Party was going, and it was really moving from center, where you had a lot of centrist views, particularly in the time of Ronald Reagan and the first Bush presidency, and was really heading to the fringes. And
the far right.
Yes, and it was really not about any compromise, not about working through issues, not about consensus. It was about my way or no way. And when it was becoming so extreme and going so far to the right, it said to people like me, we don't have any room for you.
Yes.
We're no longer. We don't think your view and your concerns are of sufficient importance
Correct.
to the overall mission of the party, and I didn't take that as an insult or an offense, only to the extent that I understood that I had lived out my time, and I needed to. David Gergen, Professor Gergen, and I had this conversation
Gergen
at
was
length.
my gosh.
Yeah, he was he actually was my professor in two
Really?
specific courses at the Kennedy School, Leadership and Communications, and the second Bush was in his second term.
That's correct.
As governor of Texas when he was running for the nomination, and had visited the Kennedy School, and Dr. Condoleezza Rice had been recently hired, maybe a couple of months before Governor Bush had appeared at the Kennedy School, and our group, one of our classes, were selected to attend the forum and to be a part of the session and a part of the question and answer period. And that's when I began to understand very clearly, not that David Gergen didn't push me in any direction one way or the other, but it was really very clear that I was representing a voice that was going to get quieter in the louder noise of the direction of the Republican Party, and so it was time to exit.
Well, I think your assessment is absolutely correct. And, of course, I've always had a choice of either sticking with it and fighting within to try to change it, or just extracting myself. But anybody looking at this and taking a look at our nation, and you as governor of the Virgin Islands, whoever is elected, if it is a polarized situation where, yes, we're going to put either a Republican or Democrat, it makes it very difficult. And when I interviewed George Bush here on this radio station, I said, we are constantly left out. A lot of the problems that we're having down here is a result of, again, a $19 trillion deficit, but more often, it's not even putting us in the equation. In the way you're reaching out to the other territories, I'm trying to do the same thing, but using the angle of, excuse me, and when I was talking to Bush, I said, when you are speaking of the states, I'd like to have you say states and territories. I mean, we are part of this thing, but some of the problems that you're having, any governor would have. The issue of, again, Medicaid, Medicare not being on an even playing field, the amount of money that we're taking out of the general fund on an annual basis, right? And these are some of these issues that you face as a chief executive.
It's a continuous conversation. I mean, on highway funds, on trade and economic policy issues. I mean, you can pass a one-sentence statute on an innocuous bill in the Congress and devastate the economy of the territories, and have done so. And so it is really important that we really build the federal relationships and strengthen them, because the folks who help to drive the creation of these policies are then become fully aware that you're at the table. So you certainly can practice a top-down sort of strategy by attending the NGA and being a part of the work session and spending 2 days at the White House with the president and being in that small circle. And then you could go to the Congress and you can meet the leadership and get your 15 minutes per meeting, and then meet with their staffers and get maybe a half hour, 45 minutes per session. Or you can really be out, or not just or you could be out in the different areas and meet with regional directors, regional administrators, and work with them. So you work from both angles, so that when there are things happening, then you know where you can reach and where your partners are. And I mean, and I say it in a gratuitous way, because when I attended my first work session as a governor with the White House and with President Obama, I raised the issue having to do with the Army Corps of Engineers and how it impacts many of our projects around. I mean, we are islands, so much of our work has to do with the ocean and the water, and where the Army Corps of Engineers jurisdictions rest. And we will find ourselves, let's say, a project like the Finger Pier at the Water and Power Authority, we will find ourselves in line behind a project where somebody is building a sloop in Miami Beach for their vacation home, and we have to wait till they get through that before they get to a project that has to do with entire community paying 55 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity and destroying the economy. And so the president said to me that there were some other issues I wanted to talk about there having to do with the South Shore and military, U.S. military installations and what have you. But in any event, he clearly assigned one of his senior aides to me that day and said, Governor, this is going to be your contact in the White House. And any of the issues you have, this is the gentleman I want you to make sure you call and speak with. And we were able to set up a meeting with that gentleman the very next day, and one of my chiefs of staff and I went to the White House and spent, I think, about a good hour with the president's aide. And I have to tell you, I've been back in the territory, and I've been able to pick that phone up and call and see action. And actually, even when we got to the issue on the Army Corps permit for the St. Thomas site on the Water and Power Authority, that phone call got me into a conference call with the head of the Army Corps of Engineer and his top staffers, and then they gave a very clear and concise schedule of where everything was and how they would get to a final decision and make it timely. And I don't want to dissuade or say, let me just add this piece, that Delegate Plaskett as well have been working and assisting the Water and Power Authority with these permits as well. So I'm just going back to the issue of the creation of your federal partnerships.
The relationships.
And we've seen that specifically, we're seeing it across the board in the government. You're going to see a lot more of it. I mean, look at the DPNR. When we came into office, the Federal Inspector General's report pretty much said to the Environmental Protection Agency, you need to cease your MOUs and the management of the governments and the Department of Planning and Natural Resources overseeing your programs. There's some $6-7 million that are owed as far back as 2011. You need to seize those funds. You need to cut all the other programs off. This is not going to work. And within a year, we not only got all of those funds, it was a high-risk designation. Not all of those funds have been refunded to the general fund, and the EPA have actually increased the funding of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources, with the latest increase being $4.5 million of Fish and Wildlife last December 18th, 2015. We see what we're doing with our new nominee for the post of Commissioner of Health, and what's going to happen with all of those federal grant fundings having to do with the CDC and HHS, and how we're really going to turn the Department of Health into a first-class health and medical regulatory entity, and two, a clinical provider of services to our community in the area of senior citizens, maternal and child health, the mental health community in terms of providing services out in the community, public education. This year, we are announcing, and as you've heard me say at the State of the Territory, you're going to see some changes in me physically. You're going to see some physical changes of me, because this is going to be the year of wellness for the government of the Virgin Islands and the people of the Virgin Islands, in the sense that
I'm proud of you.
And let me be kind of selfish here. We pay $165 million a year for our health insurance for government employees and retarees.
Correct.
And that's a little over 7,000 people, not counting their children. That's a hefty sum. And if at the rate that those premiums continue to rise, in my fourth year in office, those premiums will be over $200 million. And what we are doing is we're completely changing that strategy from worrying about what we do when we get sick, to how we teach our people to manage their health and to pursue wellness. And so as a part of this effort, it's very important for me to get in shape. And so yesterday we restarted. We've ordered a change in my schedule and restarted an exercise regimen and eat different. And I'm targeting. I lost 52 pounds, as you may remember, back in 2010. And I'm destined to work off to get 70
Are
pounds
you
off.
using are you using the same formula back to 2010 there, because you really look great? At
Yeah,
that point,
well,
you know.
yeah,
I don't know what you were doing. Obviously, you were
we,
controlling something.
we don't take this the wrong way. We managed everything white. No white bread, no white flour, no rice.
Right.
For 5 or 6 days out of the week.
Right.
Just green and proteins, and you get one day of the week you can have what you want, and a tremendous amount of exercise and cardio.
Governor,
So-
I want to switch gears, and Bob, then we're going to get
Sure.
you. Wait a minute. Val Collins, who I have a great deal of respect for, and I'm taking you back to the State of the Territory address. I always like it when you are incorporating moving forward and talking about things that you're planning on doing. You always remind everybody that we got to continue growing this. We can't spend money like drunken sailors, whatever you want to say on this thing. But when I interviewed him and I asked him, what is the accumulated debt?
Mm-hmm.
And he said the accumulated debt is $7 billion. That's what he said. Now, that also includes that extemporaneous stuff outside of the general
Sure.
fund budget. Taking a look at that situation and being able to sustain,
Well,
I'm asking you, how are you going to be able to sustain, well, just let me finish, one, the raises, which I support you on. I also supported you on the tax refunds. And do you think you got that kind of cooperation in the legislature that they're going to do the heavy lifting with you to do this?
well, yeah. Let's put it in perspective.
Go right ahead.
Now, you're using the number $7 billion.
Well, that was the number he gave me.
I'm not gonna.
And I asked him twice.
I'm
and
not
he
going to
said,
quibble on this $7 billion, but it's
Not
certainly,
general fund.
It certainly must be $7 billion of all debt
Correct.
accumulated by all entities
That's right.
owned and operated by the
Correct.
government of the Virgin
Independent
Islands. So Port
instrument-
Authority,
right,
WAPA,
right.
et cetera, et cetera, et
WAPA,
cetera.
everybody.
And if you-
GERS,
Right.
everybody.
So when you do that, you can use that number. But remember, much of that debt, much of the long-term debt is secured debt. What you really want to concentrate on in the first calling is your structural deficit
Correct.
and your operating deficit. And the reasons why you separate them out is because your long-term debt for investment in your infrastructure is really contractual debt, meaning that if I have gross receipt bonds in the market, if I
Yes.
have electrical bonds in the Water and Power Authority, even if I come into a bonanza of cash, I just can't walk into Wall Street and say, all right, I'm going to pay off my $7 billion in
Nobody
debt.
would do it anyway.
Because I'll have tremendous penalties because I've called the bonds before mature date and cycles. So it's really important to separate that because people make the argument that the government, that the people of the Virgin Islands has more debt per capita than almost every other state. And that's
Right.
just a horrible comparison because it's simply not true.
Right.
Because if you took...
Why is it not true?
Well,
Because
well,
the
be-
same
but-
formula, Governor, that they used in Puerto Rico was the accumulated debt. There's $72
No,
billion.
no,
So
but
it was a
I'll
requirement
tell you
by
what-
the SEC,
No,
right?
no,
Okay,
I'll-
go straight hauling out. I'm ready to go.
I'll tell you why it's not
Right.
not true, because many jurisdictions are broken down into structural levels. So when
right.
you look at the debt of the state of New York, that's the
Correct.
debt you're going to look at. That does not include the debt of the city of New York. It doesn't include Suffolk County. It does not
Correct.
include Long Island. It does not include the school districts. It does not include the 4 public pension programs that are included in the state under various jurisdictions.
Right.
It certainly does not include the debt of Con Edison, which everyone in the state of New York pay all of those. Now, they don't pay them to all governmental entities, but their debt carried on the backs of the residents within those jurisdictions. So when we just take the debt of the government of the Virgin Islands and its instrumentalities, which is state and local, and to some extent infrastructure that would be carried in the private sector, and you add those numbers up, you cannot simply go and look on governmentline.com or some other place and say, well, what the debt of New York is X dollars divided by the number of citizens in the state of New York, and that's a debt per capita, because the people that live in New York City also live in the state of New York, and the debt of the city of New York is not a part of the state debt of New York.
But let me continue the discussion. It is fact or not a fact that as the prime sponsor of the GRS, one way or another, we're the ones that are going to incur the problem if, in fact, the system goes belly up, let's say. Obviously, you're making some very serious moves to try to get everything under control. So when you ask me or the listener to separate this out, I do understand what you're trying to say.
I'm not saying separate it out. I'm saying,
and I know we don't.
I'm saying, look at it in the context of the debt of any other jurisdiction.
Let's put it this way: you can't be happy with it. Okay, this is what's going on. Look at the previous governor, which I was not happy with what he did major borrowing back in 2007 and 2008. Am I correct? And we use that to meet payroll. And that's what you want to get away from, right? In other words, you want us to be on our own feet. You want to handle a structural deficit. Am I correct?
And I'd like to talk about that.
You can.
And you've got all the time you require.
Really?
Yeah. The distinction in the conversation about the comparison of debt was only in terms of for a point of clarification.
Okay, good.
And not that it says that we should be happy with debt.
No, I don't think you are happy
we're
with
not
it.
going to address debt. And I was trying to really make the distinction that just our structural deficit and our operating deficit are the debts that we are primarily concerned with because they are the important debt pieces to our financial stability.
Right.
Our long-term debt, which is codified and supported as a mortgage,
yes, sir,
for the investment in our economy, for all intents and purposes, really aren't troubling. We've pledged revenues to them. We can refinance them if we determine to do that. If there are opportunities to present themselves to do that, and it makes sense to do that. But they're debts secured for ports, airports, schools, for health facilities, etc., which are long-term values to the economic well-being of the Virgin Islands. The structural operating deficit, which was $600 million when we came into office, and the operating deficit, which was $144 million in a current fiscal year, are the two troubling pieces of debt that primarily concerns us today.
And you had stated that with the ArcLight deal, we created a synergy, right? But you also indicated to the legislature, because you sent the message to them, there are two things that you did want to do: bring people on step, pay the taxes, but don't go spending this money because we've got to work on the structural deficit at the same time.
That's
because
correct.
It's giving you breathing
room. That's
correct.
And that's what we've said. And then to the extent that we grow the economy, grow our revenues,
out of it,
collect what is owed to us, is how we're going to get out of it. Now, when we talk about raises and tax refunds, some folks, and we will concede that we don't tell everything.
Really?
We don't. I don't tell everything. So, one of the important aspects of paying the tax refunds and getting them current, is because they relieve $24 million of the recurring operating deficit of the territory. Because we're always rolling over 2 and 3 years of tax refunds. So we always have to set aside $85 million to meet the obligations, because we try to do them 2 years at a time. By being able to pay them down and getting them off the books, we reduce the...
Well, you have a net gain. You're absolutely
right. We don't have a gain.
Well,
what we do is we free the balance sheet of an annual amount of money that we use every year for tax refunds of about $24 million. That's money we spend every year. So if we bring the tax refunds current, which right now we're poised for dealing with the 2015 tax refunds, which are estimated at about $60 million, what it then allows us to do is to take that, without moving the budget number up, we take that $24 million and we says, okay, we can give everybody all of the money they're due in raises, but this 10-year hiatus where the government employees have not seen a meaningful increase in their salaries, we can apply this, now that we've brought this piece in line, we can apply this piece and give some folks relief. Because we cannot believe that we could finance the shortfall on government revenues on the backs of government workers. That you're not going to be able to retain, you're not going to be able to recruit, you're not going to be able to get the candidates that you require, and you're going to have very broken system of morale.
Governor, I got to take a break.
Sure.
And then when I come back on, not me, Bob is going to come back on. He's being very patient over there. and we'll let him ask you a few questions.
Sure, sure.
We'll be back in a minute. You're on AM 970.
You're getting me excited into the pieces I like now.
You're getting, well, no, we're
that's
going to keep the again, and you're on AM 970 WSTX, and once again, a pleasant good afternoon to all of you out there. I hope you're enjoying eavesdropping in on this conversation with myself and the Governor of the Virgin Islands, Kenneth E. Mapp, and Bob White. And Bob, you wanted to ask some questions.
You know, in the course of being in charge of anything, who the person is and how he got there is important. I mean, for all of us, for any of us. And I was curious about your experience at the Kennedy School, because knowing others who have been there, it's a powerful institution. I mean, it grabs hold of your brain and then wants to change it. Give us a few minutes of your experience there.
Well, first, it's not a huge school. It's about 750 students, and it's students from almost every corner of the planet. The government of China buys 12 slots there every year. And you've got folks from the Middle East, you've got a military security component, so you've got folks from different military issues or entities from different countries. You've got countries that don't get along that have students from both of those countries. And the Kennedy School cares very little about all of that. They have a very interesting way of putting everybody together, young, older, experienced. But they teach in a dynamic way of using live issues, and they teach in a group format so that you're in a class of 60 or 80 people, and notwithstanding what the subject matter is, they put together groups of 5 or 6 persons, and they present the class with an overall issue that's occurring somewhere in the planet relevant to the course of study that you're taking in. And by the end of the semester, the class has to solve this issue. And the professors that work the class while they're teaching, part of their lessons guide you in this process. You've got to purchase all of the data and the information that's there, and the segment of the assignment that your group receives, you're expected to put a full-fledged paper together that will come with the overall paper, for which the professors will write a final document that will produce the issues and the solutions. And these issues will take into account health, life, background, education, the political atmosphere in the country where this is all taking place. And the interesting dynamic is that when you're assigned to these groups, and we'll make up the time for you, when you're assigned to these groups,
keep going.
When you're assigned to these groups, you get a grade for that paper, and all of the students share that grade. Now, if you're a member of that group and you do not and cannot agree with your group, you must produce a dissenting paper. And if the group presents a dissenting paper, whatever the grade is that the group gets, that grade will fall by 1, because that group failed to generate consensus and compromise. They were unable to come together to realistically resolve these issues. And so with all of the material that you are made, that you have at your fingertips, all of the individuals that are there, all of the world leaders that come through, all of the issues, you're in groups, you're working with people, and they're talking about their lives. When you sit and you study with people who were chased out of their countries at the barrel of a gun because of political dissension, and you study with folks from China who work for the government, and they talk about liberalizing the economy first, and we get to human rights later. I mean, we had a young man in one of our groups who was 28 years of age, and he didn't understand. He did understand, but he kept asking, why would they send him to the school? Because he had already been a mayor of several cities. He had 2 doctorates, 2 PhDs, and the smallest city that he was a mayor of was 1.5 million people. But what the government of China is doing is it is teaching democracy and liberalization and the human rights issues as a comport to after their economic reform. So when you sit there and you talk with someone and they're telling you about the lifestyles and their rules and their laws and their judicial systems, you learn in such a powerful way, and you learn very quickly to become analytical, meaning you hear what people are telling you, and immediately it is not the information that they give you that's always so important. It is what the information is telling you,
Right.
and how you are able to look at the data, look at the evidence, and ask the questions, and then to be able to work your way through with a team to get to a resolution.
So it's a Socratic method.
Yes, and it's very, 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 very powerful. I mean, as part of the curriculum that I had, and I have my master's in public administration,
Yeah.
direct and actual governance, the management of the public sector. That required in one of the spring sessions that I couldn't get a spring break. The folks in that curricula, we spent 10 days, and all we did for those 10 days, 6 hours a day, was learn the art of negotiations and learned the real creation and development of value and how you work through to get to end stages, and understanding what point you get up and walk away from the table, or what point it makes sense sitting there, and from a public perspective. Because one of the biggest weaknesses you get in democracies where people are elected to offices is that, and it's not anything negative, it's just a reality.
Sure.
Many times politicians just want the deal so they can announce it, as opposed to understanding what's involved in the deal.
Now, certainly the big deal that has just been done by your administration, yourself, with ArcLight, with the refinery, I assume we got some of the benefit of that schooling from the Kennedy School. Now, would you say that that deal, the ArcLight deal, is really just the baby born, that we haven't seen it grow yet?
Well, that's really very true, and actually there's something happening on St. Croix this very week that I'm not at liberty to discuss that
Right.
is directly related to that, but that's more of the outgrowth of what's going to be taking place out there, and what the owners really want to do, and how they want to maximize the value of what's going on at that site, and what can go on at that site. So it is the beginning, and I've been very clear that I don't want, it is not my task that the administration should be judged or be known for the ArcLight deal, because we believe that there's tremendous more value on the table and on the plate that we want to see delivered to the people of the
All
territory.
right, let me shift gears a little bit. And that was a good question, because, we supported that here. And again,
thank
it's
you.
this energy that you developed, and I clearly understood myself, being in public office for years. You finally put to rest a lot of loose ends that have been sitting out there that had to be done in the context of that arrangement. But I want to get you, and I know there is a lawsuit now going on between the Control Commission and your Attorney General. I'm not going to get you into that. No. All I want to do is I want to understand. We have now a downtown proposal for a casino where it really is going to be actually using like the slot machines. You're thinking there's a tremendous amount of investment that has already been made, I guess, in the Caravel and so on and so forth. I'm wondering, from a point of being prudent, before there is hearings and there actually is license to do this, your thoughts on the original concept was to build hotels. We're looking for lift, we're looking for room capacity, and taking a look at this yourself, because you're thinking, along with all the other plans that you have, does this fit the groove for you?
Well, any investment in the economy with new private sector dollars is a good thing.
Good.
But let's step back for a moment from the project downtown Christiansted, the Caravel
Right.
Hotel,
Go right
and
ahead.
then I'll quickly step right back to that.
All right, Ed.
You and I served in the 20th legislature, and you were a very huge proponent, and rightfully so, of gaming in St.
Yeah.
Croix as a carrot to drive investment for the
Good.
creation of hotels, jobs, and visitors.
That was a concept.
We're gonna adopt casino gambling and casino industry to the territory, to St. Croix, as a carrot if you're willing to build hotel rooms,
Right.
Drive visitation, create jobs.
Correct.
If you do that, here's
Right.
your casino license.
Right.
That's the premise of the
Right.
casino
And
statute.
believe it or not, it has not worked.
I'm glad that
Okay.
you said that.
No, I said it.
And I
Absolutely.
didn't
It did
say
not
it.
work.
And that was finally passed in the 21st legislature.
Correct.
And then we had a subsequent amendment trying to help facilitate the downtown areas
Mm-hmm.
and saying, okay, how could we use casino gaming to
Right.
help pry the blighted areas so that we have an improvement? And the legislature set forth and says, okay, under these conditions,
Right.
we are prepared to authorize a casino license and operations in the downtown area without having to make the massive investment of an entire hotel
Correct.
property if you do on a lesser level these several things. And one
Right.
of these, a couple of these several things is, one, you must have 2,600 square feet of meeting public spaces.
Sure.
You must have banquet facilities, and you must have a minimum of 75 rooms. And if you're able to do that, then you can have access, if you qualify all other things being equal,
Right.
you can have access to a gaming license
Right.
and operate a casino in the downtown areas. Now we come back to the original, your question, and
Right.
what you described, and I'm saying this in
I'm not
the
ashamed
respectful
of
way.
any-
No, wait,
anyway,
wait.
because
That-
it
That's
has
not,
not
not a
worked.
negative. That's
It's
not
a
a negative.
positive to me.
I'm saying what you described as some conflict between the Gaming Commission
Right.
and the Department of Justice.
Right.
Here you have folks who would properly or meet with the casino, which is the Casino Commission,
Correct.
which is the regulatory entity.
Yes.
And I suspect to some extent that folks will take their guidance and their cues from the commission.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do a casino as well and invest money, you also will have an attorney, because this is not a simple process.
Yes.
This is a highly regulated and a complicated
Right.
process. And the statute is clear on its face. 2,600 square feet of space, X feet of square feet of
Yep.
banquet facilities,
Right.
and 75 rooms. So if an entity shows up and says, I have 40 rooms that I'm willing to renovate and restore, I have bought property and I'm prepared to build additional rooms, I have only 1,800 of the 2,600 square feet of public meeting spaces, and I need to get these done, but I'd like to see if I can get my license and begin operations
Right.
now,
Some
and then you give
exceptions.
me a period to come into compliance. The law says the answer is no.
Right.
Because what that structure does is it lets you operate the casino, and we must ask ourselves whether the casino at Caravel will attract tourists to come to St. Croix just to
Right.
play in that casino,
Right.
or are we really expecting the local community to utilize that casino and be in the downtown area? And if it's the local community that will be the predominant consumer at that facility,
Right.
then we know all those local dollars are right now in the economy.
Sure.
So do we say then, yes, you operate for 3 years and extract money that's already here to become compliant with the law of having the 75
Right.
rooms,
Which you should already.
or you should go and bring new money to the table,
Right.
and hire workers and build the 75 rooms and create the 2,600 square feet of public meeting spaces and create the banquet facilities. And once you do that, then here is the license, because you've now put money in the
Right.
economy, for which once you open up your casino, you will begin the process of extracting your reward.
And you've been consistent on that on other issues. But let me bring you back
Yes.
to the original failure of the first idea.
Sure.
Because I think what we've done is we created a hybrid, and we're doing the same thing we did with the hotel premise. We're talking about East. I'm not going to pick on anybody.
Sure.
Everybody knows. Where there were so many damn exceptions. The original intent of the
Didn't happen.
legislation didn't happen. Most of the people out there that were gambling were Virgin Islanders that couldn't afford to be there. So we created a social issue. But you're right back, and I'm listening to you clearly. Is it if you do create that statute and you go outside of it again, you're duplicating the same damn thing you did before, and that's why
And you're hurting the
Holland
economy.
failed.
And you're hurting the
Of
economy.
course you are.
You're hurting the economy because what you're doing is you're not getting that new dollar to create that job, to create that spending for concrete, for steel, for blocks, for paint that you need to have to get the place ready for this new license. And there's this confusion in the statute that the Casino Commission can grant a 30-month waiver or give you 30 months to become in compliant. The law doesn't say that. The law
No.
says if I submit an application and rather than the Casino Commission saying, well, this application is not complete, so we're just going to vote it down because all the parts aren't here,
Yes.
the Casino Commission can say, all right, you don't have all the pieces that you need to qualify for a license. So I'm going to give you 30 months to do all the things you need to do to get your license application consistent with the law. And once you do that, then we will act. In other words, we will defer action until you bring your license application current. And the law says to the commission, you can give up to 30 months to allow that applicant to bring that application into compliance with the statute.
So let me ask you, are you questioning their authority again with reference to their statute? Because we could go...
Stop.
Go right ahead. Go
Please.
right ahead. Go
I'm not questioning anybody's authority.
Well, wait a minute.
I'm-
You just
no,
said,
wait a
can
minute.
you do
No,
it?
slow
Yes,
down. slow down.
I'm listening to you.
Use your brakes a little bit. Use your
Okay,
brakes a little bit.
good.
I'm not questioning anyone's authority. I'm telling you what my full understanding of the statute
right.
is, not only based in the Department of Justice, but based on my attorneys at Government House.
All right.
And not in the same meeting. What does the statute say? How do these pieces pertain? Because clearly the Department of Justice has had discussions with first of all, let me thank the folks who are investing in the Caravel, who have improved
Right.
tremendously the rooms and are
Right.
improving the facility and the things that they are doing. We welcome that, and we look forward to continue to working with them on what they're doing. But the law is really very clear. The law requires a certain level of investment
I understand.
in order to get the license, and you can't. It would be inconsistent. And I had this conversation with the EDA board on a number of the applicants that
What I
they
was gonna get you
recommended
back
for EDC benefits.
Right.
You get these things as a result of the person sitting on the other side of the table of the Virgin Islands is saying, I am committed to do X. And the law is saying, well, when you do X, we, the people of the Virgin Islands, will give you Y. Well, you can't give the Y if the X hasn't been done.
Well, let me ask you something. This is more philosophical on the way you're looking. No, but listen. Because you brought up a good point, which I was going to bring into that. You felt, again, with some of these benefits that you denied, which was sent up by EDA, that, in fact, they weren't in compliance. So you're saying
and there were new ones that we denied, and we
right,
did not believe that
they
the
were-
economic investment rose to the level that was worthy of the tax exemptions that were being
All
granted.
right, Ken, the promulgation of rules and regulations, I've always had trouble when I was in the Senate. We give too much power. But you're saying that some of your commissions are not operating within the law, and they're not allowed to be lenient in something that says this is what you have to do.
No. They are allowed to be lenient when the statute gives them the
That's what
authority.
the statute doesn't.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
They are allowed to be lenient when the statute authorized them to be lenient. But if the statute says that this is what must be done, a commission or board cannot write law and grant themselves authority which they do not have. So that if the law requires me
Right.
to learn to drive and take a driving test to get my driver's license, the director of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles can't just hand me a license because I came and asked him for one,
Right.
because he's not authorized to do that. So he cannot put onto himself powers that the law have not put onto him.
All right.
And a commission is likewise. If you're saying that the value of a downtown casino on St. Croix requires 75 rooms, 2,600 square feet of meeting space,
Right.
and banquet facilities, it isn't because it just requires those things. It means that if you don't have them, you're going to hire people to build the rooms. You're going to spend the dollars in the economy for the blocks, the sand, These are all, they're going to generate revenues. You're going to put people to work. And once you have spent money to do that, then we will allow you to have a license to run a business that we acknowledge you will extract dollars out of the economy. The law doesn't say, come with a plan to do it. Yeah. And then I'm going to give you a license to run the casino, and you can take your 3 years of profits that you make from the community, this very same community to which you were required to invest, and then go build the rooms and the meeting spaces to become compliant because you didn't build them. Right. You didn't put the new money in. The people in the community put it in by being a customer and using the facilities in the casino.
Could it be fair to say you have a strict interpretation of the law?
No, I don't.
Well, wait a minute.
I don't.
How do we get? I am not arguing with
you.
No. You have a.
I don't know that.
If that is what is required, somebody sends something up. Maybe not in this case, but whatever. You're going to look at it and you're going to say, "I'm sorry." If they have the leniency to play around with it a little bit, it's a judgment call on your part, right?
If you say, for example, and I don't need to name the company, but I can really give you the example. I had a new applicant for an EDC benefit come to my desk. They were going to hire 10 people, and they were going to make X level of investment. And when you looked, and please remember that I served as the Assistant Executive Director of the Industrial Development Commission, so I sort of did this for a living. So when you looked at the application, they really had a level of sales and work they were going to do for which they were going to get tremendous benefit from the tax exemption. And what they were going to put in terms of employment, and they did ask for a waiver in the minimum employment, what they were going to put in employment and what they would have been required to spend in that business because of the nature of the business, the first 3 years of tax exemptions paid for it all. Meaning that the monies that we gave up from the Treasury was actually paying what the applicant should have been contributing into the economy.
Right.
You're not going to grow the economy if you simply take money out of the treasury of the government of the Virgin Islands and out of the pocket of Virgin Islanders that live in the Virgin Islands to build in the Virgin Islands, and you bring no new money into the gate. That's not a growth of the economy. And so when you start talking about casinos and tax exemptions, you must make a clear and unfettered demonstration that you're running new dollars into the cycle of economic growth and activity in the territory, which allows job creation, which have sales, which allows, it's like high tide, which allows a number of the boats in the harbor, everybody to rise a bit. If you only come in with the idea, but when you put this structure together, you're really using the dollars that are already in the economy, then you're not really investing.
Would it be fair to say that you would not have supported like the Home Depot concept then?
I was very clear. I was very clear publicly that the government of the Virgin Islands should not have gone into debt financing to pay it with gross receipt taxes for the island crossing facility.
Correct.
The people of the Virgin Islands will pay each year. They will pay the debt obligations of that facility. And when that mortgage is completely paid, the owners of the facility will walk away with a 100% paid for facility, and the people of the Virgin Islands will have no asset benefit. They will get, there's no requirement on the owners to pay back the treasury of the government of the Virgin Islands. That is a complete giveaway. And so where is the new dollars? That means that, and you could not, they get into this conversation with me about TIF financing, and
we know it isn't.
Thank you.
We know it. You already taught me that last time.
All right. So you taking the gross receipts from all of the other stores in the island to build a facility that will put all of them out of business is not good government policy. That has nothing to do with Home Depot. That has to do with how the government structures its business.
I've got to take a break. The one thing I can say is that you're consistent.
Thank you.
You are consistent. We'll be back in a minute. You're on AM 970 WSTX. And Bob, you go with the next question, all right?
Listen.
All right, we're back again, and you're on Straight Talk with Redfield on AM 970 WSTX with the Governor of the Virgin Islands, and again, Bob White. And I like that point that you made off here, and you're correct. Nobody is trying to be combative here. We're having a very serious
Yes.
discussion. And anybody out there listening to this, even when you see maybe some tension between Ken and I, we're trying to have a discussion. And believe it or not, Ken will go and he'll talk and talk, and Holland wants to always try to get him back. And the two of us are an interesting phenomenon to watch, because I know what he's trying to do, but at the same time, I clearly understand you want to have some direct answers. In that last session that we just had, if anybody out there didn't think you made him an answer, and it wasn't combative, it is what you're dealing with. Okay, all right, Bob, go right ahead.
Well, moving from what can't be done to what can be done, which is, of course, what most people are interested
It
in.
can be done.
Yes, what can be done.
Yes.
Now, you have talked recently about the need or the opportunity for 250 more rooms, hopefully more, but certainly that number came out. There are a number of people, and I've had discussions with a number of people, and I'm sure you have too, the possibility that we don't perhaps need one place with that. Perhaps the island could use a sprinkling. Some smaller facility in Frederiksted, maybe something at Cane Bay for divers, another facility downtown. You know, we have a number of vacant spaces. The government owns land downtown on the boardwalk, and there are hotels on the boardwalk for sale. And certainly you built a hotel on the boardwalk, and you know what that's about. What do you think about the possibility that on St. Croix, because we have a diverse place, St. Croix, more diverse than St. Thomas, because Frederiksted is a different entity than Christiansted is, and we have the great dive facilities on the north coast. What do you think about the possibility of a number of smaller facilities? I mean, the big hotel chains have also, 100-room, 75-room, and 80-room components that they are willing to build. What do you think about that?
Well, the whole idea of the hotel facility borns out of a study that the Public Finance Authority had commissioned in 2003 or 4 by HVS International. HVS International, people can Google it on their own. HVS International is a very well-known and a high-end consulting entity that does hotel valuations and destination work for any major tourism destination anywhere in the world. I mean, any major component of accommodations, gaming, hotel development in the billions of dollars, you will find HVS has been contracted to be a part of that. So we brought HVS in 2003, 2004, and we basically said, as a destination, as St. Croix as a tourism destination, and looking at accommodations or a lack of accommodations, we wanted an assessment, we wanted an understanding of how we were perceived in the region, we wanted to understand why we were unable to attract branded facilities, and we wanted a strategy on how to get out of the malaise and get St. Croix to be a more vibrant destination for tourism in the tourism industry. And they produced this 200-plus page report that took in the entire region, took in the areas of Florida, the Northeast Corridor, the whole issues with airlift, and what have you. And basically, it gives the premise that is very clear that if the people on St. Croix and the people in the U.S. Virgin Islands wish St. Croix to be a serious location for tourism visits, there are a number of things that must happen. And one of the things that must happen was that even at the bare minimum, at the barest of minimum, St. Croix were minus 1,200 branded rooms, minus 1,200. So even if you spent $100 million as advertising to bring people to St. Croix, you would have a tremendous problem being successful, because one of your greatest component infrastructure pieces that you need simply does not exist. And if you're serious about tourism of any shape and form, not what you wish to be branded as in terms of history and heritage and culture, all of those are brand experiences. But if you wish to be a destination serious for tourism growth and development, you must address your accommodations. And then you must address them in the context of how tourists travel, why they select destinations, the criteria under which they use to select destinations, and how you get them to your site. And one of the biggest primary issues that were leveled within this study was that the largest traveling segment in the United States of America is your business traveler. And that largest segment has over a 90% retainage and usage of their loyalty rewards in the conduct of their business for themselves and their families. So that means that all these people that are traveling all over the place all the time are racking up points, and they're going to facilities for which they can use these rewards, and they're taking their families with them. And so that the absence of branded rooms meant that you pretty much had no access to the majority of these people who are spending money because they don't got to pay for their rooms and they don't got to pay for their flights. So that's all cash that they can bring to a destination and eat, rent cars, sail, and do all the things they do as they visit these locations. And so that as a minimus, if you want to begin the process of really getting you St. Croix as a destination, these, and there were several besides hotel rooms in terms of that's in that study, these are the things you must do. And one of the central core pieces of this is how do you drive branded hotel development. And back in 2003 and 2004, in the heyday of the market, this was not the collapsing time, this was the height of the investment market, HVS advised that private capital to drive the first branded hotel facility to St. Croix would be elusive at best, because nobody's going to jump into the pool first.
Right.
They want to see some commitment by the public sector side, and they want to see it being real. And it used the example of Miami Beach, it used Trenton, New Jersey, it used Austin, Texas, and it used right here in the region, Puerto Rico, and how they were able to completely turn the corner as a destination by their investment in branded hotel room development and what it brought about for them. And so being at the forefront of that process in 2003 and 4, we met with HVS and we looked at the destination study and we said we would like an update of the study. And let me announce today that the update of the study have actually begun. HVS has assembled a team and they're going to update the destination study for St. Croix. We have no preconceived decisions regarding where any hotel facility on St. Croix should be located. The destination study will produce considerations for a transaction team. I have started to develop a transaction team for this project.
Good.
We are after what was called a 2003 and 4 a 4-star facility, but today they're now calling them upper class facilities. And we're looking at a minimum of 250 rooms to around 300 rooms with a component additional number of units for timeshares, because the industry is using timeshares to really help drive down the development costs. We have a transaction team that I'm on that team, Dr. Simon Jones Hendrickson, Commissioner Val Collins, Commissioner Beverly Nicholson Doty, my attorney Emil Henderson. We have brought Joel Holt on in the PFA. We're bringing him on as a transactional attorney from the private sector. I believe I can announce this today. Elizabeth Armstrong will be on that team, and Jack Pickle from downtown Christiansted will be on that team as well. And of course HVS will be on that team as our advisors and consultant. And pretty much what we want to do is we have the dollars to own such a facility and to construct such a facility. And what we want to be able to do is to enter into a developmental arrangement with one of the major brands. And we will let a vetting process and a negotiating process determine which one of the brands will give us the best deal and relationship, not only as we own the facility, but in terms of making sure we get a return on our investment, that they are incentivized to ensure that this facility is being used and people are occupying it. And then how do we turn the development of that facility into a conversion with the airlines for more airlift from different corridors of the United States into the island of St. Croix directly. It is to begin the process to drive room development. Now, I'll say this to you as well, that's the major piece, and I really want to be able to send a package to the legislature by early summer outlining this relationship and how we would pay for such a thing, and asking the legislature for their consideration and approval for the island of St. Croix. And, that's the target timeline that we're sort of working with. But it does not negate our interest in other areas because, again, we have a number of subsidiaries and comportments of the government of the Virgin Islands that we are looking at what we would do in additional property that we have in the downtown region. This money will not be used for other hotel facilities to expand or improve, or to buy them and upgrade them, or to have a smattering. It will become the anchor piece of what's really necessary in helping St. Croix to be able to achieve really a serious branded position in the Caribbean as a tourism destination.
Right.
And let me say, most people will tell you today that we're having a better season than we had last year. Right. And we're going to have a better season next winter. But at the end of the day, we've got to be able to demonstrate the airlines are doing well with their flights into St. Croix. As you know, Delta added another flight. We're having a conversation about with one of the airlines about a Newark to St. Croix, Newark flight. We're talking about anchoring the Boston St. Thomas flight that stops in Puerto Rico and goes back to Boston. We're talking about making that the Boston St. Thomas St. Croix back to Boston flight. But the point being is that we have to demonstrate as well that we're really serious, and we're going to have the other component and investment pieces in the island that will drive private capital behind it to be able to have the kinds of facilities that are needed. The bed and breakfasts, the individual smaller hotels are all going to be able to benefit by the synergy of a facility such like
let
this.
me ask you a question back, and getting you back into this discussion we're having here today. I'm wondering how many times you have these kind of discussions, other than they can listen to it on the radio, with some of your boards and commissions. Because the signals that you are sending are very definite signals. Also to somebody who is a potential investor. Where I am having something I want to explore with you. You talked a little bit earlier about, obviously, the private sector, what you expect out of them to put their money on the line and this and that. You don't want to encumber the ability of this government to handle other issues that they need by guaranteeing whatever. But in the same respect, you now sounds like you want to go the condado concept. I think that's what they did. Is that consistent with, again, the way you're also looking at the private sector and what responsibilities?
100%. 100%.
But you want to have title to
because
that.
Because the people of the Virgin Islands will own it. We won't operate it, and we won't hire people, and we won't manage it. We will do that in a partnership arrangement with a brand facility or a third-party manager that will be responsible for the vetting, the training. When you use the facility, you don't know who owns it. Frenchman's Reef is not owned by Marriott.
No.
Frenchman's Reef has a private owner, but that owner is not involved in the day-to-day operations and management of the facility. They've hired and branded their property with Marriott. The Ritz-Carlton in St. Thomas is another one not owned by the Marriott chain. It's owned by private owners. And in Puerto Rico, in 2005, the government of Puerto Rico sold the Ritz-Carlton that it owned.
They spun it off. So
that's right.
It preclude you from spinning anything off if you want to,
that's
right?
What we've done in the past is we've done these deals with the private sector where we say to them, all right, I'll guarantee your mortgage.
Right.
So you have no problem in siphoning. I'm not speaking to anyone about anyone individually, but nothing prevents you from siphoning the cash out and not paying the mortgage because you have a guarantee from me, the government of the Virgin Islands, and then when the bank grabs my guarantee or the guarantee of the people of the Virgin Islands, you still own the property and I have the debt. I have nothing to show. There's no asset on my book. There's no expansion of my asset base. This relationship that many of the states have been using in the last 15 to 20 years is about taking the public investment and ensuring that there's asset value in the inventory of the public sector. Right. And making these arrangements for entities to come in and completely manage and operate them, and then you incentivize the performance based on how you pay them for their services.
Going below you on your boards and commissions, what I'm trying to get at is these kind of discussions we're having here today, and we're talking now about the investor. as I said, the investor ought to be listening to this kind of a show, because sometimes the board or commission operates outside and makes certain promises that they can't keep because you're looking at the strict interpretation.
Well, no, but
or if they have latitude, they have latitude.
But that's the discussion we had very early on.
Right, but I'm trying to get back at it a little bit.
Right, that's the discussion we had early on, is that I said that sometimes we, and let's say with all the best intentions.
Correct.
Right? With all the best intentions, we give advice and we give direction that really is not supported by the statute. And the whole purpose of us having a legislative branch of government is because it determines what the policies and what the laws are and what authorities and discretions
But what does it
people
say?
have.
What does it say to the investor? He doesn't want to get in the middle of this. In other words, if he's getting certain signals from somebody, it creates an instability on the investor.
Well, no, let's not be naive.
No, I'm not naive.
No. Let's not be naive.
How is that naive?
Let's not be naive. I'm buying a bank, but I can't afford a lawyer who's going to take me through the bank sale. And so when you show me what are on the books and how many people have deposited money, and I say, okay, this bank has $1 billion in it, I don't realize that at the bottom of the sales sheet it says, yeah, but you can take all the money out just at the closing, and I only end up with the. So the point I'm making is that
that's very simplistic.
No, but it has to be. It has to be.
You saw the same thing with our EDC benefits, with Treasury playing games with us, and you had a lot of lawyers that were advising clients improperly because rules and regulations weren't promulgated. All I'm saying is an investor wants to have some sort of a.
Again, let's not be naive. The reason why the Treasury Department came in here on the EDC program is because you had people in the Virgin Islands getting EDC benefits, not investing any money.
But there weren't all of them
Let
doing
me finish.
that.
I didn't say all of them.
Right.
I did not say all of them. Clearly not all of them. But you had some of them, a few of them, a minor amount of them, come into the territory, get EDC benefit, and was selling the tax exemptions to car dealers in Houston, Texas. And behaviors like that. And remember, these benefits are from obligations under the Internal Revenue Service Code, not under the Viazo taxing statutes.
Right.
And because of the government's inability to step up to the plate and say, wait a minute, this is how this program is supposed to work.
We weren't regulating it.
All right.
I understand that.
So when I met with the Department of Treasury in January, in the furtherance of the reduction of the number of days that you have to be on island as a resident in the EDC program, when we worked and gotten the Treasury's agreement that it will support our amendments to the statute to really clarify the issues on source income to businesses in the Virgin Islands, I made it very clear that I talked about my background, my work with Treasury when I worked in the IDC with Bill Roebuck, and that as governor, this is my understanding of the program, and this is the way I will work with my new government to ensure that this is the way we work through these issues. Now, since my early days in office, I have sat with the EDA Commission and had a very robust conversation, and we actually worked out a process that when applications are sent to me for my consideration, if I had problems or concerns with them, I would invite representatives of the EDC board or the EDA board to come to Government House, and we will have a full discussion about it. And here was an opportunity for me to state my concern, and they could make their further case. They could make their additional case. And to be quite candid, we've had one of those since then. And out of 4 of them that I had questions about, the EDC board was able to make a real good case and argument why 2 of those should proceed, and we all had a consensus that 2 of them would not go forward. And that is furthering the conduct and the business of the people of the territory. That's why that takes place.
Yeah, but the investor, what I'm going to get back, the investor's not naive. But again, that kind of discussion where actually you're re-looking or revisiting one would have been a lot easier if that communications between the board and yourself would have been there.
I can't do that with every board and commission.
I
you know that.
I understand it, but the investor sometimes feels like they're in the middle, and I'm not criticizing you. You've made a clear indication of the way you think about these things. Bob, go ahead.
Now, would you say, it reflects on what we're talking about, the federal government, who is out there looking at us, and the notion that they're not noticing us is not true. I see in you less fear of the federal government than I have seen in some earlier administrations.
There are
I'm using
partners.
that big, yes, and I agree with you fully. And we see that even, with your new person that you're going to bring in for health, this is a federally aware
awful.
person.
Yep.
This is a
Yes.
person, let's call it federally aware.
Well,
She knows.
well up the chain in HHS.
Yes, she understands what the Fed wants. And the Fed wants us to meet federal standards in many areas. Now, I see you as not, let me use the term frightened. Frightened is really the wrong word, but let me use the term. You are not frightened about meeting federal standards because I think we all see, as we're now in the 21st century, we must do that, regardless of being a little scrap floating down here in the Caribbean Sea. Would you say it is fair for me to make that statement, that you have less fear, using that word, of the federal government and meeting their standards?
I have no fear of the federal government. We have our disagreements, but what we're doing is we're using and accessing tremendous amount of federal dollars, and they're designed to really get a service and a benefit to the people in the community. And I want the same thing. I'm going to truncate a bit here. When we talk about Dr. Michelle Davis as a commissioner of health, Dr. Davis has been working with us a year on a number of federal grant dollars that we haven't been able to spend as far back as 2011. Jobs, inoculation, services for mothers and infants. Out of $3 million a year for mental health services, we can't spend more than $500,000, and on and on and on and on. And we weren't hiring people for which the federal dollars would pay for. And got me an opportunity to go to the CDC and spend 2 days and do a work session there with the team there and meet with Dr. Frieden, the director of the CDC, to talk about all of these issues. And it is out of that session where I asked Dr. Frieden and Sam Tavares about helping me to really find a health commissioner. And they put a notice out in the industry that we were looking for someone really needing to rebuild the Department of Health. And I was almost capsized out of my chair when I learned that Michelle was very, very interested in this task because she had spent a year with us, and Dr. Davis wanted to really help us. And so out of that conversation, out of Dr. Davis's volunteering and willingness to see if we could come through an interpersonal act relationship to be able to help the government and the people of the Virgin Islands is how this was put together. Now, let me say that our relationship with Ron Sharp, the U.S. Attorney, is equally as strong. We've had issues about talking about whether the ATF is here or whether HIDA is here or whether they're now all here. We've got, I believe, it's 26 police officers embedded in federal, local task forces working throughout the territory. Last week I met with the head of HIDA and the amount of resources that they're going to mobilize in the territory. We have a unit that's now in the territory of federal local task force that's working specifically on the issue of child pornography and children victimization from a sexual perspective that we haven't had ever in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And that relationship is only growing. The Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office has entered into an MOU in looking at gun crimes and determining who would prosecute. The U.S. DOJ is going to provide us training, and they're going to provide us mentors from some of their more successful federal prosecutors to our local prosecutors here in terms of training and development. Look at what's going on in the Virgin Islands Police Department. You've got to commend Commissioner Richards, who for the very first time had a federal judge commend him and the police department for their advances under the consent decree. April 16th is the first class that we're expecting to send our first 8 police officers in the Virgin Islands to train for 6 months in the New York City Police Academy. And then an 8 is following. We're going to do 16 a year, and we're working through all of these issues to make them happen. So our relationship is not about being in the Virgin Islands and isolating ourselves. It's about looking out. Carl Holtz from the Disney Corporation, who has ties to St. Croix by his parents' work at the Fairleigh Dickinson University that was here on the East End. I was able to ask Carl for help, and he's the CEO of Disney Cruise Lines and Vacation Operations, and he was able to send a team from the Disney Parks and Corporation here and worked with us an entire week on St. Croix, and this month we're going to get a complete detailed written report on the issues of, again, destination building and services for St. Croix. When they met with the business community, they talked with them tremendously of how they're telling us, you're leaving cruise ship dollars, leave your island because you're simply not doing this and you're not doing that. People will spend more if you just simply move this from here and put it over here. And Commissioner Doty, who really knows this business well and does a tremendous job for our territories at the forefront of it. So it's not about fear. I didn't get elected to be in charge of everything and run around and only my ideas matter. I got elected to really look and work on the community's behalf and bring the strengths where I can find them to the table. And as long as we can advance the quality of life and the opportunity and the economic growth of the territory and really increase and make sure that people are safer and feel more freer and being out and about and enjoying themselves, the residents that live here and the visitors that come, then I believe I'm, ringing the bell?
You're ringing the bell. You're the orchestra leader. All right, we got to take a break.
Sure.
At this point, we'll be back in a minute, and then we're going to wrap this up. You can have 10 minutes of again, any...
We're going to hold hands on St. Croix.
Well, whatever we're going to do. In any event, don't get the wrong impression out there. We'll be back in a minute. You're on AM 970 WSTX. Listen to again, and you're on Straight Talk with Redfield on AM 970 WSTX, and I've got the honor to have in the room the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands, again, Kenneth E. Mapp, and
Can I put in a plug?
Plug? Go ahead. Plug.
We're authorized the raises for over 3,500 government workers, and I'm not going to go through naming all of them. And one of the things I want to put in a plug for, and I'm telling my friends at the legislature, I want them to really go ahead and vote for Senator Jean Ford's legislation for raising the minimum wage in the private sector as well.
Good point.
Because we really we have to look at these issues, and they're really very serious. And I'm going to be really plugging that. I neglected to plug that bill in the State of the Territory message. There was such a war about how much stuff was in that message. And I want to really get out there and say not only are we concerned about the level of compensation in the public sector, but we are equally interested in our compensation levels in the private sector.
All right, any closing thoughts at this point that we didn't go over?
No, I'm not going to. I thought we went through quite a bit, and I want to ask Bob. Bob that has an issue he wants to chat with me about briefly, and I'd like to let him get it in.
Go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted to invite you to exercise on the bike path that I know you will be able to create, and 3 administrations failed, but I know you won't because you're a builder.
Well, certainly, Commissioner James will tell you in our conversations about where we begin constructing new roads. We're going to talk about bicycle paths because, we see them, they're very successful. And Dr. Frieden at the CDC, the director of the Centers for Disease Control, when we talked about the wellness program for the VI and we talked about setting up fitness centers and everything, and he said, that was good, but that fitness centers only generally retain about 30 to 40% of its peak occupancy. After that, people aren't interested. But when you are building roads and building outdoor spaces, you should really make provisions where people can walk and ride bicycles, because we find people get to see, they want to people watch, they want to see different activities. And I walk. I mean, I use the trails at the old Marietta site. I use the bypass, and then Christiansted Town. People look really, sometimes they're not sure if that's me, and I just keep, and I use the trails at the Buccaneer and really get out there and do several miles. And this is what we want to really encourage. So you're going to see, I'm not going to be able to promise you that in the time I'm going to be in office, that we're going to have bicycle trails on every road. I can't make that statement, but I can say that you're going to see quite a bit of it happening.
Well, the bike path on the South Shore, all the plans are done, and they're all up to federal standards, as you know,
Right.
and $500,000 has been spent.
Chabo,
All right,
chabito,
all right, okay.
dinero.
We got to wrap it up. Ken,
Thank
I
you.
wanna
Thank you so
for
much.
the interview. It's always a
Yes.
pleasure having you here, and again, keep up.
And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity
Oh,
to talk about the
absolutely.
issues. And I want to wish the people of the good Virgin Islands a wonderful afternoon, and to tell them just stay safe out there.
Right.
Keep your heads up. And I can assure you that my team and I and the Lieutenant Governor, we really, really are excited about the things we're doing. And we're really looking forward to change the way we handle the affairs of state. And we think we're being successful at the direction we're going. So thank you all very much.
Well, and I want to thank you for the interview again. And Bob, thank you very much. Well, we'll be back in a minute. And when we come back on, we're going to have the Department of Health on talking about Zika for maybe about 10 minutes. We'll be back here on AM 970 WSTX.
Listen to